Hello, my dear friends and family. Oh my god, I'm screaming so bad. Operator Starsky here, and we are currently waiting for Preston to join. Betsy, I know that it's time. I'm very sorry. We confused the time zones just a bit. So Preston will join us in just a while. I hope that until this happens, I will be able to entertain you and also talk about the recent updates as well, because we have quite a few of those. And as always, it's so good to see you, my friends. Everyone, Maurice, Fast Ultralight, Newman, and Katya is there in the chat as well. Brigade, James, Jellyfish, Salt, and everybody else. So good to see you, my friends. It wasn't me. Guten Abend. Oh my God. All right. So while we're waiting, let us talk first of all about Steffen Bear. You know Steffen Bear, right? Not now, honey operator Starsky just went like, Jesus. Don't do this, please. All right, like this will be recorded. The better part of you always requires your attention first. All right, I'm not running anywhere, but. Let's talk about Steffen Bear. You know Steffen Bear, my good friend from Netherlands, and he's currently in Ukraine. To those who don't know what we're talking about, there is a tiny reference, all right? Stefan Berg, he's been on my channel already several times. We did interview on UATV. We met in Amsterdam last year, and currently there's Rickroller patch, by the way. And currently, Stefan is serving in the armed forces of Ukraine. What he does specifically is he joined the unit that is responsible for air defense. Basically, he's a drone pilot who intercepts Russian Shaheds and everything else. Disco San Andreas, what's wrong? Tell me what's the problem. We'll try to solve it. All right. So if you're hearing an echo, close the stream. Echo. I literally I don't know what to say, my friends. Maybe it's like bleeding somewhere through your speaker and something like that. Literally no idea. But you know, because this is my channel, the technical fuck ups happen every single time. I don't know what to do with them. I'm like eliminating those gremlins, gremlins of gremlins, as much as possible, but just I don't know what to do. So returning to Steffen, friends, he is currently requiring our support because they are stationed close to the front lines to be able to intercept those Shaheds more effectively, and they require power stations. All right, as simply as that. Please check out this link. I will drop it in the chat in just a second. And also the same link is in the description, all right? Let's help our friend. Batteries basically, yeah, save lives. So you can see everything here and all the people who donated already. Bernard, you are absolute legend, of course. So this is one thing that I wanted to talk to you, my friends, because Stefan Bear is my good friend. Oh my god, how to switch between these 1000 windows? I have no idea. Ah, there it is. Yeah, so I decided that it would be really cool if we could help him just a bit, all right? So they need to have their batteries charged and communication equipment and things like that. You know that currently there's a tiny problem with electricity and generators as well, especially the front lines. And yeah, if we can let's please support Steffen and his unit, all right? Because they're doing amazing job. They're actually intercepting all sorts of Russian crap flying at Ukrainian cities, and they're saving lives. All right, let's be real. I hear echoes all the time. Same here, frankly speaking. I don't know. After the Revolution of Dignity, something happened to my ears, so sometimes I either don't hear like anything at all. Happens very, very rarely, by the way, especially when I get scolded by somebody, or I hear all sorts of weird shit. So you're not alone, my friend. Oh, wait a second. Wait a second. Did you see that President Zelensky is #1 rated foreign leader according to U.S. voters? That's really cool. That's really cool. Also, considering the fact that there is such a powerful disinformation, right? Such a powerful campaign waged against President Zelensky and generally against Ukraine by the Russian terrorists. Considering all that, he's doing well, I think. All right. Eyes on Ukraine has only 510 subscriptions on their YouTube channel. Yeah, they do. I hope that they will get just a bit more. In USA, you are 5x5 and crystal clear. All right. Perhaps some members have crap internet. To be kind, could be, my friends. I don't exclude these facts. So let's check out some of the interesting updates, all right? One of the craziest things I've heard recently, by the way, that is from the Russian media, by the way. So Russian ombudsman in Sverdlovsk Oblast actually revealed the number of Russians that were missing in action only in 2025 and only in Russian Sverdlovsk Oblast. That is 8,000 Russians. And we are talking about only 2025 and only one Russian region out of 85. Okay, so if we want to roughly calculate how many Russian terrorists went missing in 2025, we gotta multiply this by 85 and we will have approximately 680,000 Russians that potentially turned good only in 2025, which is freaking impressive. Holy. It's impressive, but my friends, it's not surprising at all. This one, I will talk about this one most probably now. All right, so just so you could understand the situation. Here you can see a Russian man. He is a lonely father of a bunch of kids. And this is his faithful mom, all right? This old lady right here. As you can see, she is trying to get some water from some hose somewhere not at home, because at home she doesn't have water whatsoever. This is her face there on the picture. You can see that basically she lives like in Russia, all right? Like majority of people do there. Okay, so that is his mother. So their story, just so you could understand, the dude has two brothers. So that mom basically gave birth to 3 Russian men, all right? Instead of asking her sons, her own kids, to fix water in her freaking house, that very lady, that woman over there, all right, instead of asking her sons to fix the water in her house, she sent them to the front line in Ukraine, where they became better, or basically went missing. All right, typical Russian tragedy. And currently, she doesn't have sons because they, of course, will not bring her any money. And she also doesn't have a freaking water in her apartment. And basically, why we can see this dude talking there on the screen is because he is addressing all sorts of like Russian leadership, all sorts of Jesus Christ, Holy Mary, I don't know, Buddha Gautama, Roman Pope, and everybody else to help her somehow, because when she realized that her sons will not return from the Ukrainian war, all right, apparently something happened to her health, and he's currently, that dude on the picture is running around and trying to understand what to do with his life, with his mom, and everything else. Please tell me, what do you think about this, like this Russian tragedy, soap opera? Send your sons to the war and, expecting to get some money instead and receive nothing. A hole from donut, because apparently they became better currently fertilizing somewhere, so some fields in Ukraine. And they are like, what do we do now? Oh my God. And of course, she's not paid compensations because they're considered missing in action. Most probably, of course, they just had their IDs collected by their commanders, and those IDs were burned because that's what they do all the time. And they will be considered missing in action forever, and she will never receive those compensation money at all. Guys, I'm checking these updates. There are so many things, seriously, that don't make it to the headlines. Things like that. I wish more people learned about this one. Also, Ilsky and Pazar. Oh my God. Ilsky Oil Refinery had a happy morning today. All right, so there it is. Happily burning.
Горит. Ветер немножко поменялся в северскую пару.
The dude is driving his car and he's like, most Russians will be like, oh my God, look, refinery is on fire. Holy. This one is like, it burns. It burns. Seriously.
Горит.
Yeah, it burns. Yay. He seems so happy about that, considering the fact that Ilsky and Pazay is, the Ilsky refinery is one of those companies, one of those enterprises that actually feed the citizens, and most probably himself as well. And also he's driving the car, right? The car needs fuel, most obviously. That is insane. Oh my God. Okay, let's talk about something else, because generally we have a lot of crazy updates. Some of them are, by the way, extremely heartwarming, and I want to show you this video. All right, so since the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion, we managed to return 2,000 Ukrainian children from the Russian captivity. And out of those 2,000, and you can see those kids there on your screens, that's something that makes my eyes water, actually. So that's absolutely impressive to see that. Of course, we know that currently Russia is still keeping approximately 20,000 Ukrainian children. Out of those 2,000 kids, 83 were returned home due to Qatar. Okay, Qatar was involved in returning those kids back to Ukraine. And impressive 19 thanks to the United States First Lady Melania Trump. All right. I know that 19 might be not a lot, okay, but today I'm not gonna make fun of her because actually 19 Ukrainian children returned. And if she actually helped to return at least one, that's already a life saved, all right. So I will make fun of her later in other episodes. So that is absolutely impressive. My timeline is not on time. Legit to think, don't worry about that at all right? Don't worry. How brainwashed are those kids? Can they be fixed? My friend, that's a very good question, which unfortunately I don't even know how to answer. Because we know that the kids that Russians snatch from Ukrainian territory, they're being indoctrinated. Some of them are being indoctrinated in military camps. Some of them are being already adopted by like new Russian parents, even though they might have relatives in Ukraine still. And this one, Sarah, I just want to sign under your commentary, all right? Like 100%. Equality for all, except orcs. Fuck orcs. And that's a very tough question. Can they be fixed? Of course, if they grew up in Ukraine and they spent years in Ukraine, of course, it's easier. But for example, before the full-scale invasion, we talked a lot about the Ukrainian kids that were born and raised on the Russia-occupied territories, like in Donetsk or Luhansk or in Crimea. And what do you do with those kids who actually have never even heard a Ukrainian word, all right, in their lives? That's absolutely insane. Andy Woohoo, hello, my friend. So good to see you here. That's why when people ask me like how do you reintegrate those kids back, I have no idea, because this is something that requires people who at least have some kind of knowledge, maybe psychologists. I don't know how to answer this. All right. Also, Andres refers to Carlito, and Carlito is there in the chat as well. So good to see you, my friends. I don't understand the 20K number. Is this includes the kids living on the occupied territories? So, my friend, this number doesn't include the kids living on the occupied territories because there's 1,600,000 of them. Okay, according to the Ukrainian ombudsman, more than 1,600,000 Ukrainian children are still on the Russian-occupied territories of Ukraine at this point. We're talking Donetsk, Luhansk, and also occupied territories of Kherson and Zaporizhia. They are there. So it's absolutely insane. 20,000 Ukrainian children that were kidnapped. In most cases, as the kids tell themselves, in most cases they were kidnapped when Russians eliminated their parents, and then they literally snatched them and took them to their services. So they were brought to the territory of the terrorist federation. And basically, that's how it happens. Oh, sorry, I gotta take a sip. Frankly speaking, again, we can confuse the time just a bit with Preston, and I'm like, okay, I have like 15 minutes, and I'm literally eating spaghetti at this point. And I'm like, I start to like shove the spaghetti in my face, as fast as possible, because I know that I'm running out of time and I gotta like run here and prepare everything. And then I'm here, and turns out that, oh my god, the stream had to start like 1 hour later, and I can barely breathe because the last portion of spaghetti is still here somewhere. So I gotta push it down with more coffee. Another amazing update, my friends, is that Ukrainian military will be training Bundeswehr forces. Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and Germany signed agreement according to which Ukrainian instructors will be teaching the German military in the military institutions of Germany. So that's another great update, and also we have Preston joining us. My friends, let me add you right here. Hey, yo, can you hear us?
I can. What's going on, man?
No, my God, I'm so happy. I'm so happy that you're here. Oh my God, how do I switch this? Wait a second. So finally, my dear friends, yay, Preston, how are you?
Thank you for your patience. The time zones is a bit much for me sometimes.
I have no idea who made planet round. Seriously, like I don't really respect people, who say that Earth is flat, but sometimes it's just so convenient. Oh my God! So, my dear friends, it's my huge pleasure to introduce Preston Stewart. He's a military and geopolitics content creator focused on war, national security, and also foreign affairs. Also, Preston, I know that you studied international relations, right, and terrorism at West Point, and also served as a U.S. Army Field Artillery officer, and also traveled to Ukraine. Tell me this: what was the biggest impression from visiting Ukraine?
Man, that was quite the intro. Again, thank you so much for the invitation. I've been it's awesome to get to chat with you here today. And so the biggest thing in going to Ukraine, I don't know, man, it was overwhelming, start to finish. To be honest, it was my first trip. So it was end of December, beginning of January, so just a little over a month ago. Oh man, everyone was so accommodating. I made some jokes that I didn't tell a lot of people that I was going, and just kind of kept a small circle. And everybody that I did tell that I was going said, "Great, you can stay at my place, and I'll pick you up at the train station, and I'll drive you wherever you want to go." I had, 15 offers of people just saying, "We'll take you wherever you want to go," which was incredible. We already had it all lined up, but the hospitality was something else. So that was cool. And then another big takeaway was just how proud everybody was. We talked to a lot of soldiers. The soldiers were so proud of what they were doing, and like I get it, they should be proud, but just wanting to show off. Like I've been on that side before, when you get somebody that shows up, an outsider shows up, and you've got to do your little dance and show them what you're doing now, and it can be annoying. I certainly got annoyed when I was on that side of it, but I didn't get that impression. Maybe we did annoy, maybe we stepped on their toes, but every soldier we interacted with was just like, okay, now you got to see this, check this out, and like just so excited, rightfully so. So start to finish, man, awesome experience.
That's so amazing. Did they feed you? Because like this is Ukrainian tradition. If you are a guest somewhere, you gotta be fed like I don't know until you pop.
Yes, it was nonstop. Now, one of the key stops was McDonald's in Pavlograd. So I guess that was they all promised that it was going to be a lot better than American McDonald's. I think it was. It was definitely different. But I also have a feeling that the guys coming off the front, that was like their first, fast food, and it just tasted that much better. So they definitely made me go to the McDonald's, which was great. And then, yeah, out east, there wasn't a lot of places to stop. So we're a little more limited, a lot more kind of gas station type food is probably the best way to put it. Snacks on the go, which, by the way, gas stations, wow, that's a whole experience on its own. So I say just gas station food, but that's actually like pretty good restaurant quality. Didn't expect that. And then, yeah, from the minute we got there, it was everybody we interacted with was trying. You got to try this. Have you tested this out? We tried a lot. It was good.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially the hot dogs at the gas stations. I think they're the best.
Those were unique. Yeah, kind of in. It wasn't like a bun, but I don't know. How would you describe that? It's like a
French hot dogs. It's basically like a pocket, and like with the
yeah.
yeah.
It makes sense. I think that's probably a better move than the buns that we go with. But yeah, it's good.
Yeah, we have those with the buns at Shell gas stations, but those French ones, like they're just more convenient to eat, and they basically taste much better, I think.
Yeah, it was great. Again, like I say, we just got some gas station food, but it was actually like we got gas stations just down the street, and stopping there, like you kind of know what you're getting, and it's a roll of the dice to get into the hot food there, and it does not look good. But some of these gas stations had like, I mean, it was almost like a restaurant in the side of it. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we have that a lot actually. I want to ask you this, Preston. After visiting the front, what changed your mind compared to what you thought before?
So specifically with visiting the front, we got the opportunity to go out to Izium and then south to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. And I didn't realize how difficult of a situation it was out there. We look at maps every day and get videos and get statements. So it wasn't like completely unaware of what was happening there, but driving the road from Izium south, 2 lane road, most of it 2 lane road, now all of it covered in drone netting. And that's it. That's the access. I mean, when we left, we went west over to Dnipro for the night. So we got to see what the western approaches looked like. And it's farm country, I jokingly referred to it as 1.5 lanes because often it wasn't wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass going in opposite directions. When a military vehicle came, a couple times we had to get off the road to allow them to pass. And it's very difficult to keep an army in the fight logistically when those are the ways in and out. I mean, we know, helicopters are not going to be flying in mass. There's not going to be any fixed wing aircraft flying in to drop off goods. So you're really looking at the only viable ways in and out of that pocket. And there's not a lot there, man. That made me nervous. And then seeing in both directions how much further the drone netting was going back, which is it's a mixed bag. I love that they're setting that up further and further back from the front lines. That's great. But also the reason they're setting up further and further back is because those dang drones are going further and further, longer range, and the Russians are moving a little bit in that direction. So that was tough. And strangely, again, we look at the maps, we can see it. You can talk to the soldiers that explain it. But being there and driving on it, I thought this is a lot more tenuous than I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a completely different type of death lurking because I remember 2023, there were drones, but again, not as widespread as today. Because 2023 already was a completely different war than in 2022. And here in 2026, it's completely different than in 2023. Everything is so much saturated with unmanned devices and stuff. And it's a completely different sort of death lurking for you because it's in 2023 when I was in that very area with my guys. We were in Chasiv Yar and around, and that's basically when we kind of had some kind of drone hazard. They would generally either drop something or there were Lancets as well attacking our positions, our artillery positions in the tree lines. But currently you have a very, very wide gray zone, basically very, very wide front line because the range of, for example, fiber optic drone is 20 kilometers. And it's absolutely, I don't know, like so much efforts it takes to just deliver necessary supplies to the positions and also evacuate wounded. That's something absolutely crazy. How do you think?
That's the thing that hit me driving that route is the soldiers are still going to go. They drive in much more dangerous areas than we. I mean, we were a ways from the front, right? That Izium to Sloviansk route and then west. actually on the farm roads. At one point, we stopped middle of the night, and GPS, of course, not working, and just which was much more confusing than I thought it would be. For what it's worth, I thought that it would just like it wouldn't function, but no, it still worked. It just wouldn't tell you when it stopped working. So you're staring at the map, trying to figure out like, is it working now or is it not working now? And you're trying to line it up with the things around you, and that was a headache. So, anyways, we took a wrong turn, and the guy stopped and said, "Wait a minute, that's the Pocrovsk direction. We don't want to go there." Spun around and headed out. But we did not go close to the front lines. Is what I'm trying to say. And the soldiers, of course, do that day in and day out. But the logistics are not soldiers, and at some degree, you have commercial vehicles dropping off that supplies. And the further those drones reach back, the further and further those drop-off points are going to be. I mean, I think, you talk about the unmanned ground vehicles having to get stuff all the way up to the soldiers at the zero line. There's a step. That type of thing is just going to get further and further back, and it becomes so difficult. Those roads, I don't know how many 18-wheelers and flatbed trucks are going to be willing to drive that, civilians, to drop off equipment. So the logistics piece is going to be the challenge. The soldiers, they're still going to be driving it. They're still running that risk. They have the EW. They have everything they can to protect themselves. But keeping them supplied, I think, is a challenge. That said, how many times have we seen Ukraine do this? How many different pockets have there been where we thought this is getting ridiculous at this point, and then it's 6, 9, 12 months later, and they're still running guys in and out of that little area, for better or for worse. I know that's been debated at times.
Yeah, of course. So, like in Pokrovsk, that Russia claimed to have captured, like, what, in November? Something like that.
Last November. Yeah, it's happened a few times now.
Yeah, they do it all the time. Everything is possible. It's possible to take Kyiv in 3 days. Everything is possible when you lie.
Well, I had a question for you on that front. That's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned Chasiv Yar, and I saw that just today they started to complain that, wait a minute, actually we didn't take it last summer, and they're still active fighting. That's happening more and more. Why? Like, it seems like we saw this happen in Kupiansk. Now we're maybe seeing it in Zaporizhia. It just popped out that it might have happened in Chasiv Yar. What do you think is causing that severe disconnect between what is happening on the ground and the Russian command?
Several things. So first of all, of course, disinformation, but it's not the main reason. All right, they needed to boost morale, show some kind of victories, even though this victory is absolutely miserable, and a bunch of Russians just run to the Pokrovsk downtown, installing flag, taking selfie, and die immediately because there's swarm of drones literally deatomizing them right there. But they need to show some victories, because when they talk about places like Pokrovsk, they talk as if it's Brussels, as if Pokrovsk is the size of like Kyiv, maybe bigger. That after taking Pokrovsk, there's only the road to Berlin, and they need those victories, because if you take a look at the map, it didn't move much, like over the period of 3 years, it didn't move much at all. Russians would take 1,200 kilometers on a daily basis in March 2022. And today in 2026, when they brag about like a couple of thousand kilometers captured in Ukraine, considering that Ukraine at this point, still the controlled territory is bigger than 500,000 kilometers, and they lose so many men, they need to show some kind of victories. They need to show that they're still advancing, they're still fighting somewhere in the outskirts of Lviv, for example, which was the case, by the way. In 2022, they published the map with their troops portrayed fighting literally on the Polish border, which was really cringy.
Did they really? They had it that. Wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
I had it on my stream, bro. I had it on my stream.
That's
but the biggest reason why they do that is literally because they have a very, very big disconnection between the reports coming to the commanders on the local level, for example, on the operational level, then the reports coming to generals and reports coming to Putin, because every general wants to show that they are doing great job taking territories. So how does it work? The commander is sending his troops. He burned, for example, a battalion, right? Battalion of Russians, and they occupied 10 kilometers. So then this brigade commander is reporting to his general, and he thinks, okay, 20 kilometers is like, too cringy to report. Let's tell him that we took like 20, because why not? And he tells the general that they took 20 kilometers. General reports to the chief of staff, and he says, we took 50 kilometers. All right, so let's just add just a few. Okay, 50 kilometers, and then Shoigu or Gerasimov reports to Putin, and he says, well, we took 100 kilometers in just one day. We are currently fighting, in the area of literally Kiev Oblast. They need, first of all, they are lying. They are presenting the distorted information to Putin. But this information is distorted on every stage, all right?
Yeah.
Because it's very cringy to admit that they spend days and days, and those days turn into months, basically in the same spot. They don't advance at all.
It's crazy. Think about how dangerous that is in terms of for any organization. When everything is built on a lie and a small lie becomes a bigger lie, I mean, you're just kind of hoping that somebody else gets caught before you do, or that the lie plays out. It gives me anxiety thinking of trying to do that day in and day out. It's wild.
Yeah, absolutely. You remember, what was the name of that dude who was responsible for withdrawing from Kherson? Surovitsyn, like the bald dude.
Surovikin.
Yeah. So basically, that's one of the good examples how it works. Just like that.
That's true. Yeah, he was being realistic, and he didn't last very long.
Yeah, and that's just one of the examples, and probably one of the reasons why, we can see so many Russian generals becoming better in Russia as well. Either getting sucked out of window, or gravitation changes somehow, so they just fly out of it or something like that.
It's a risky job, yeah.
Yeah, dying job, I would call it this way. How do you think, okay, we know that currently the unmanned technologies are advancing, all right? They are advancing, they are expanding, and looking at China, by the way, that recently presented its huge unmanned bomber armed with like hundreds of FPVs that are AI driven. We understand that unmanned technologies will most probably rule in the nearest future, but besides that, how do you think, what battlefield trends are analysts underestimating right now?
I think hopefully this isn't too close to what you were talking about, but the counter drone technology, I think, is lagging and not getting enough attention. It's not as sexy, to be blunt, as bombers and FPVs and long range strike munitions, but I think we know very well how important those are. I would argue even more important than the kinetic strike munitions, because we're seeing our adversaries around the world figure out, whether it's the Iranian Shahed drone or some variant of that, they're finding out that they can put these things together for cheap, and our interceptors have not gone down effectively in price. I know Ukraine is kind of leading the way in a lot of that with the Wild Hornet, Python, some of those models that have been great and are actually cost effective. But I don't know how that plays out. There's still a major disconnect there. I mean, we've seen this for a while now. You can't bring down a Shahed with a Patriot. I mean, you can, but you don't want to do that very long. And I think we're spending more time from a U.S. perspective. I think we're putting a lot of attention on the strike munitions, and we're seeing that with some of our competitions at the military level. of like figuring out how to drop munitions, figuring out how to resupply troops, and all that stuff is great. I think we're lacking a little bit in the interceptor category across the board. I say interceptor, but I should probably just say counter drone, because they have to talk with a general here in the United States or in the U.S. Army a few months ago. He was asking about new technologies in Ukraine, and he, in a sense, kind of threw his arms up. He's like, "It sounds like you're describing that these things can't be stopped." I'm like, well, there's not really a good solution. We were talking about fiber optic drones, and that is kind of how it goes, where there's just, at some point, you're like, I don't know, just put up a net and hope that the net stops it. I don't think we're spending enough time on that. The other side of that is a little bigger picture, where I don't think we understand yet how decentralized the battlefield has become with drones, where we, throughout the global war on terror, we would say call in an airstrike. You get in a direct fire engagement with enemy forces and say, I need an A-10 or an F-16, whatever, to come drop a bomb on this location. And there was an approval authority a little ways up the chain. That might be your company commander, battalion commander, brigade commander. And, you know, depending on the situation, it could take 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. You get it done. It just, you know, somebody needed to be there to bless off on this and essentially accept the responsibility for the strike. That can't happen. Like, we need to veer so far in the other direction. And I think we're going to have a hard time accepting that, you know, a platoon size element has lethal strike munitions and has a degree of autonomy with what they hit. And we just need to view that more like a direct fire weapon system than right now. I have a feeling, and I'm not in the U.S. military, but I have a feeling that approval authority probably sits up a little higher than it should. And we know from watching everything play out in Ukraine that where these things are the most effective is when, you know, that drone team can just hunt and they know what they're looking for. And when they find a target, they can strike. They don't start hovering around the target and call it up and decide, is it okay if I move forward with this attack? They just execute. So I think the decentralized nature of the fight as well is something that we're going to have to work on. That said, I think we are. I don't know if you saw the article that came out just a couple days ago about how the NATO exercise did not go super well. And I know a lot of folks are quick to jump on and laugh and ha, but like, that's how it's supposed to. That's how it's supposed to happen. Like, that's how we learn. That's how we get better. Is we failed at something. That's the time to fail. And hopefully we've got enough friends that'll help us out and build up a better system. So I'm optimistic, but I do think we've got a ways to go.
Yeah, and you know, bro, I would not call that a failure, because that's exercise. Ukraine had to, Ukrainians, unfortunately, Ukrainian defenders had to die and collect and let Ukrainian army collect this experience so we could pass it to our allies and our friends, so they are prepared as well. So that's, and also I completely agree with you, because it's so hard to concentrate, so hard to set priorities when, for example, you are commanding Ukrainian army. All right, you need long-range weapons for deep strikes to dismantle Russian war machine and everything that feeds it. You need weaponry to eliminate Russian personnel, because all this time, all right, since 2022, at least until 2024, when we had artillery, which we didn't have a lot, but when we had it, we would use it primarily to strike high priority targets, destroy Russian logistics, Russian fuel supplies, ammo depots, and strike Russian command posts, all that. We were not talking much about eliminating Russian personnel specifically, all right? And you need weaponry to do that. Luckily, that's one of the priorities today, according to our new Minister of Defense, who said that we need to eliminate at least 50,000 Russians a month, and then karma will say us thank you. And it's very, very hard to set priorities when you have all that. Again, air defense, all right? Huge problem, because you need to have something to intercept Russian Shaheds, whether it's short-range missiles like those that are currently built in Brussels, in Belgium, or it's interceptor drones. Then you need to have something to intercept Russian ballistics, because they always come together in the combined strikes. And when people say that Zelensky and Ukrainian leadership and government do great job, it takes so much effort actually to understand even your strategic priorities. Okay, what do you need to invest into first to make sure that your whole defense will not collapse somewhere else?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we'll look back on this period of years and appreciate it more down the road as to how well, or in some cases how poorly things played out. Something that I don't think is getting enough attention in that regard right now is how Ukraine shifted the fight away from a grinding artillery war to a drone war. Ukraine could not win the artillery war, and we were not helping. I mean, we were giving aid left and right, but the artillery shell production and the howitzer production was not good. Like, nobody wants to get into an artillery war with Russia. That's a bad deal. Nobody wants to get into an air power war with the United States. Like, that's our bread and butter. Russia had forced Ukraine into their way of fighting, and I think, however long it takes, we'll look back on this period of time and talk about how impressive it was that Ukraine was able to shift that and say, Russia wants to fight this type of war, we can't. And through the development of some of these drones and these technologies and these tactics, you shifted the fight to something that was more on a level playing field. And I mean, if you think about where it is right now with the drone technology today, it's crazy that there are areas where Ukraine is leading and areas where Russia is leading, because that wasn't the case with the war Russia wanted to fight. You'd have to really kind of nitpick to talk about where Ukraine had the upper hand with artillery. And it was mostly around some of the Western platforms, HIMARS, when they had a lot of effectiveness early on. But when you're talking about volume of fire, shell density, that wasn't, nobody stands next to Russia in that fight. So I do think, in terms of like realigning strategic priorities, I think that's one under the radar right now. But down the road, we'll look back and say that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the greatest achievements that we had was, for example, switching to 155 millimeter standard, the NATO standard munitions, because compared to Russian 152 millimeter, they have advantage if Russia needs approximately 12 shells to hit target, or at least consider the target hits. The Western howitzers need 3. So we even had, this. I cannot say that it was kind of edge, but it was still an improvement for us, because we couldn't afford a lot of those shells, but at least we had a chance to use less of them to still be able to strike the target.
100%. And a lot of those Western systems are better. The 155 systems, a lot of the self-propelled howitzers, they are just side by side better than the Russian counterparts. But the quantity they were churning out was insane. And it's just, to be blunt, like, that's not you don't want to fight the fight that they want to fight. Right? That's the opposite. That's what they planned for. That's what they've built their whole army around for decades. So, getting away from that, I think, was huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we have several commentaries here. So first of all, we have James there in the chat. Why Ukraine? I want to point out Preston did the first fundraiser that really got my lab started way back in May or June.
What?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. You know James? I think he's been on my channel. I think my previous stream was with James. Also, Starsky, what is Preston's favorite ice cream to eat when reading about Russian oligarchs falling out a window? Because it's a great tradition generally among Ukrainians and people supporting Ukraine.
Listen, I'm weird with ice cream, man. When we go out to get ice cream, I look for the bubblegum flavor. I think we don't do that a lot, but a lot of times we'll get the the little pints where they found a way to make it not like really, really full of calories, so you can eat the whole thing. And yeah, we'll hammer those. Chocolate chip cookie dough is kind of the move.
Sounds nice. I prefer classic. I prefer vanilla, but that's just me. Andreas asks, what do you and Preston think of US and Dutch pilots joining the air battle? Seems like a big deal. Information transfer is gold. What do you think about this one?
I don't think we have a full accounting of that story quite yet. From what I've seen, and I'll defer to you here as well, it sounds like there was some reporting that Western NATO pilots were in F-16s flying over Ukrainian skies. The sourcing for that seems pretty suspect. I think there's the possibility for a really good program there. I think there's a way to do that where it's not an active duty pilot in NATO, but somebody who's getting out can maybe sign a contract just like they can within the Ukrainian military. I think that's maybe something that could be pursued. I think this one, let's give this one a little more time. I have just a little bit of a feeling that it might not be accurate reporting, and it might be more that we've got trainers over there, which would not be surprising and probably wouldn't shock anyone. That's where I'm sitting right now. What have you seen on this?
Generally, that's my thought exactly. I only saw that on sources that I could not really confirm. So let's wait just a bit.
It also went very viral on some Russian channels. That always makes me a little bit nervous. Like when a lot of them are hammering something about NATO being in the fight, I think, all right, that is playing a little too closely into exactly what they want. But it could be the case. Give it a little more time, I'd say.
You know, I have like a slight suspicion of why it went viral on Russian media, because in Russian mythology, or right, in this Russian bubble of disinformation, Russians don't die from Ukrainians, all right? Russians only die from bullets shot by Polish mercenaries, NATO troops, Martians, but not Ukrainians. Ukrainians in Russian mythology, they are absolutely useless. You can just kill them in millions. And if you listen to Russian propaganda, Ukraine is basically like nobody lives there anymore. Streets are empty. But
well, I think that played a little bit into when the F-16s were being debated. You remember there was the conversation of, can Ukrainians figure out F-16s? And it was a little bit of like, I mean, yeah, I probably couldn't, but I'm sure pilots could figure this out. I feel like it plays into that a little bit. It's over your head. It's too fancy. It's too technical. You guys would never get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like 555 howitzers, like they will not even be able to use it. I remember we had this crazy story. It was either in Bakhmut or in RUBIZH. I think in RUBIZH. So our guys got a howitzer, a 555, my brigade. And the way they got it, so it belonged to a different artillery unit that was shelled. They withdrew, but the howitzer remained there. And our recon were like driving down the road. They're like, oh my God, howitzer, check this out. So they towed the howitzer to our brigade, and we used it for a while. So the guys literally learned how to operate it on a YouTube, you know, that's basically it. They found some, yeah, they found something like some software that actually allowed them to guide to aim the howitzer. They had like those Ukrainian artillery systems, the combat management systems, artillery management systems on their tablets, and basically they used that howitzer for like a month. There was a tiny bit of shells left, but then the guys from the artillery unit visited my brigade and said, can we have our howitzer back, please? We're like, who told you it was yours?
Something I always talk about, and it happened a lot at the beginning of the war, when people would say, well, Abrams would be too complicated or whatever it might be. It's like, I love our soldiers. I love soldiers in general. I've had just wonderful friends throughout the military. U.S. military equipment is not built for the smartest people in our country to operate. Like, it is built to be able to operate be operated by somebody who might not be able to read all that well. Like that's just what it's designed for. It is. Now there are certain systems that become more complicated over time, and there's certain roles that are more complicated than others. When you're talking about like the bare bones of the U.S. military, it's the purpose of it is to be used by people that it doesn't require a PhD to use it. So I mean yes, people can figure it out. That's how it's built.
I can agree on that, but you have no idea how much even the people who cannot even read well in the United States, how much they are still better than literally Russian terrorists, because take the smaller arms. All right. We have Kalashnikov, we have AR-15, AR-15, like it's a combat forever, like on YouTube. Which one is better? Kalashnikov shoots the rail like all the way through and stuff like that. But when you look at Kalashnikov was actually made for apes. It was made for, people who... You take a dude from like a very, very far village in some Ust-Pizdysk, you give him a rifle, he starts shooting it in like 3 days, basically. When you look at Kalashnikov, it doesn't contain a lot of parts. You can disassemble and assemble it very easily with one hand, and nothing gets lost in the trench somewhere and stuff. AR-15 still requires a bit of like thinking process to be present, to be able to operate it. Yeah, and it requires still some skills and some knowledge, which is something that actually United States Army have. That's something that they require from their soldiers, because it's very important to have soldier who can not only shoot well but also think. And that is basically the biggest difference between the Soviet army, which is Russia, because it didn't change much in terms of doctrine, and NATO armies. That's 100%. I wanted to ask you this: besides drones and counter drones, how do you think which single weapon system is currently changing the war more than the headlines suggest?
Oh, that's tough because drones are the headlines. Between sea, air, and land. Let's see. Gosh. It's become so much of the fight at this point. Like, we haven't really seen, talk about armored vehicles, we haven't really seen innovation in that regard, right? We've seen adaptation to survive modern battlefield and the drones. Maybe, you know what? Maybe this is kind of a boring answer, but I got the chance to talk with some soldiers the other day in Gur Legion, some Westerners, and they said mines. I might go that direction. There's so much focus on the drones that I think we don't pay enough attention to the fact that there are millions of mines on the ground everywhere. And they're not there from a year ago or even a month ago. They're being dropped right now. And Russia is looking for, well, everybody's dropping mines, but in their case, they were saying Russia was watching their infill and exfil routes and flying drones overhead or using artillery to mine that area like every night. So while they're out listening for those drones and everybody's so concerned about the FPV coming in on a fiber optic, meanwhile, they've got toe poppers or bigger completely blanketing the path. And one of the issues they talked about was the snow. It sounds silly, but I didn't even think about it. They would drop these mines just before a snowfall or as it was snowing, and then the snow would cover them up. But of course, snow is not enough to prevent that mine from going off if you step on it. And you should have no chance of seeing it. So I think that's probably not gotten enough attention. It will, when the bullets stop flying and there is peace, those mines are just as deadly, and those are going to take center stage in clearing them up. And I know that's not just an issue in the gray zone. It's an issue across big portions of Ukraine. So I would say right now mines are not getting nearly the attention they probably should.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. I literally today watched that video where 2 Russians were sent to their position, and their deminers, their engineers said that they cleared the area, and literally one loses his foot on the landmine, the other loses his foot, and they get stuck. And that's absolutely crazy, because the reason why, for example, Ukrainian counteroffensive in 2023, 2024 wasn't as successful was literally because Russians had a lot of time to prepare, build defense lines, and build those massive landmines that require specific equipment that Ukraine didn't have. And even if it had, Ukraine didn't have a lot of different components, like aviation, for example, close air support that was not there, was not the case since 2022. And currently, with the drones that control such huge areas, 20-kilometer on one side, like 40-kilometer wide front line, basically, considering that the FPV, the fiber optic FPV travels 20 kilometers, even more. So that's absolutely insane. And we can see that the front line is basically not moving at all, not moving much. Russians are failing at their mechanized attacks because whatever, slow-moving targets like tank or APC gets deatomized instantly. Russian bikers are not effective as well. Russian horses, I'm not even mentioning them. So we can see basically the positional war like it was during the World War One. Do you see this changing somehow?
I don't think so. It's hard to imagine. Try to be creative, because it's easy to fall into the trap of it'll never change. It's always the exact same. But it looked like that for a period of time in 2022, and then Kharkiv happened, and then Kherson happened. So I think it's easy to fall into that trap, but something would have to change drastically, because it's gotten so much to the point where, and we've watched both Ukraine and Russia adapt to that reality. So if we look at what's happening in Zaporizhia right now, where Ukraine does appear to be taking back some territory, there's no way that they've got a division of armored vehicles lined up behind them ready to go on the assault, because even if they do clear some terrain, that threat still persists 5 kilometers on. So, and it's the same with Russia. Every time we see, it makes, you get the videos every time they decide they're going to go on an armored assault. We see 7 tanks and APCs burning somewhere near Pokrovsk usually. So it's hard to see how that could be changed, other than, again, if we go to the World War I example, where the German nation was collapsing. And that's kind of what brought about an end to that war. And I think, there's historians that can dial this in better than I, but I think it's worth remembering that the end of World War I they were fighting in France. They weren't fighting in Germany. They weren't on the French-German border. They were manning positions in France when they lost the war, surrendered, and went back home. So that's what comes to mind right now, is maybe there's the possibility that through some negotiations, through some diplomatic means, ideally with military pressure, that there's a way to force a significant change in the front. But I don't know. It's very hard to see a scenario where either side executes a breakthrough, but then isn't then able to follow up in any meaningful manner. What about you? What do you think on that question?
I bet on the collapse of the Russian regime, because currently there's absolutely no effective way to launch, for example, another counteroffensive. Again, landmines. You need demining equipment. You need a lot of demining equipment. You need to be able to approach somehow the Russian positions to suppress their heavy machine guns, their anti-tank guided missiles, and most importantly, evade their drones. All right, so it's very, very hard to imagine how exactly either army will be trying to conduct some kind of breakthrough using what they have now in terms of vehicles. So I have no idea. It will be very, very hard. It will cost a lot of lives and a lot of vehicles. And also, if Russia is able to do at least kind of something, considering that they still have attack aircraft, in case of Ukraine, it will be a different story. So hard to tell. I don't see it happening at all. I would bet, but not much. Not much. I would bet on Russian collapse because that is something absolutely possible. Again, according to a lot of experts, according to Jason Smart, my good friend, again, who talks about this all the time, he says, you gotta isolate Russia economically if you want to win the war fast, all right? If you want to help Ukraine win the war fast, you gotta isolate Russia economically, you gotta increase the economical pressure on Russia, and you will see it collapsing basically like in the World War One, like the German army collapsed, the same way. Which I think is extremely smart. Unfortunately, not a lot of people talk about this and think about this. Unfortunately, there are some decision makers who still have this desire to like trade with Russia, and they talk about trillions of dollars uh, of worth.
I don't know. I don't know where that trillions of dollars is coming from. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's completely unknown.
I don't know. I've heard, you know, bro, I've heard so many interesting points of view, like even coming from people in Germany, they go, we gotta be friends with Russia, we gotta have partnership, and we will be successful. I go like, do you think Russia is a successful country? Like looking at the quality of life, or what can we call the you know, life in Russia. It's hard to imagine Russia collapsing because Russia already collapsed. Like living there is a torture by itself. That's why Russian people sign contracts and earn money in Ukraine somewhere, because to them war is probably the smaller suffering than, I don't know, like living somewhere in Ust-Pizdyoysk, again, somewhere in like in Omsk, in Ussurisk. That's absolutely crazy. I think. Do you think that Russia can collapse like Germany in World War One?
Yes, I do think it's possible. I think there's. I'm not going to pretend to put a timeline on it. I mean, they have been more resilient than I think a lot of people expected. Their economy has taken a battering, and they're still moving along. Uh, they've lost more soldiers so far in 2026 than I think most people thought they would lose in this war. It's a shocking volumes, and I think just about any other country around the world, the people would have done something or found some way say this is too much. This is not worth it. We're not doing this anymore. So they have been resilient in ways that I certainly didn't anticipate. But they're not. It's not never ending. I mean, we saw for the first month, the first time I think since the very beginning of the war, that Russia lost more soldiers than they recruited. That's huge. And now Russia doesn't have a manpower shortage, but they do have a bit of an issue of getting enough people into the force. And they haven't made that jump into full conscription and actually mobilizing the entire country. I would say at this point they seem pretty averse to doing that. It does seem like Putin is doing everything he can to make sure that this war is fought by the others. It's fought by the poor people. It's fought by the outskirts of the country. It's not fought by the people in Moscow. You know, so there's still room for them to go, but they're definitely closer to what I would have to think is some sort of breaking point. And I don't know. It's hard to imagine Putin walking back at this point and saying, "Enough's enough. All right, guys, we're gonna call it quits here." But there has to be pressure mounting between the economic instability and the kind of the isolation on the world stage and the losses at the front. That cannot go on forever. Now, it might be able to go on for another 20 years, and that'd be a problem. But it does seem like we're at least trending in the right direction. One thing you mentioned earlier about people wanting to trade with Russia, it always, again, to go to the historical context here, like it's not a bad thing to say, we're great partners with Germany right now. We're great partners with Japan right now. But 1939, 1941 wasn't the time to really talk about our future trade agreements with those two countries. We had other things to deal with. We'll get to that if we can solve this problem and get through this. Maybe in the future we can have a positive relationship there. Right now, it's not the right time to be talking about what the trade possibilities could be with Russia. It's also been infuriating to see some politicians in the United States seemingly put Russia as a higher priority than Europe. So what are we doing here, guys? in no world, there is no scenario, there's no metric where you put Russia side by side with Europe and say we would be better served with a closer relationship with one at the cost of the other. That one has been hard to, I don't know what that's about. That is weird and wrong, like in every regard. But long way around to say, yes, I do think there's the possibility of Russian collapse. I wouldn't put a timeline on it, but the things are happening that would lead to that. Just a matter of how long they can hang on.
Yeah, I agree on that. And people who think that their country will be successful, because again, I talked to this guy on a YouTube in the commentaries. Sometimes we all do that. So I'm like, do you imagine your country being like allied? I'm talking Germany, being allied with such amazing states as North Korea, Iran, Cuba, Russia. And he goes, well, if my country is successful, then I don't care. I will be allied even with like Somalia. I don't give a damn. How many Russia's allies are actually successful? Like DPRK? Really? I don't know. Those stolen Syria, those stolen territories like Abkhazia or like South Ossetia. Google those pictures. You will see what like decades of neglection turned those places into. Like Abkhazia was, even during the Soviet times and post-Soviet times, before Russia snatched it, it was like basically like Florida, like Miami. People from the whole Soviet Union would go to Abkhazia because they had like resorts, beaches and stuff. And currently all that basically looks like Pripyat because that's Russian management. And people who think that their countries will become successful, they are delusional. They don't understand that Russia doesn't care about that at all, in my personal opinion.
I mean, I have more sympathy for countries that maybe don't have a lot of options, and there's certain countries in Africa and even in South America that, for any number of reasons, they're not they don't have the opportunity to maybe align closely with the United States or Europe or even China. So I understand how in some cases it's like the only option, and I get it. I can understand that. I have a hard time understanding wanting to choose that over other alternatives. There's a lot of differences that we have here in the United States with our allies around the world, but all of those pale in comparison, based off of what we get in return, like the benefits of being tightly connected with the EU and being a part of NATO, all of that. It's hard to look at that and say, well, with that as an option, maybe I'll test out this Russia thing. But I don't know. There's some folks making that argument. It's a bit ridiculous.
Absolutely. We have several more commentaries. So first of all, Starsky, please tell Preston Stewart he's my favorite YouTuber. I love you, Preston. Thank you for covering Ukraine. From Adam Gronek. We have another one. How many more years will the... I love questions like that because, when I was in the military since 2015, every single person I spoke to, that was exactly the question they would ask, like, how many more years will this last? It seems Russia peace talks are not going to happen another 5-10 years. Do you think it will last another 5-10 years?
Hesitant to put a timeline like that on it. I feel pretty confident that it's not going to stop in 2026. It just seems like the two sides are too far apart in what would be needed to bring about some sort of viable end to the war. We might see some sort of ceasefire, short term. I don't know that it would be much longer than a week even. But in terms of a viable end to the war, Russia hasn't changed their demands at all. It's the exact same. And it's hard to see Ukraine ceding big portions of territory with no security guarantees. So, unfortunately, I think 2026, at the very least, the war will continue throughout.
Yeah, I also think so. And also considering the fact that Russia can launch new mobilization, which, by the way, was something that is being indicated all the time. There are different leaks showing that they are updating their draft databases and stuff like that. Considering this fact, I think that they will find a source of manpower that they can just constantly feed into those meat assaults and keep them running. And basically, this would prolong the war for years. You probably heard that last year they adopted the legislation, the law that allows them to mobilize the reservists, and they said that the reservists will not be sent straight to the front line, which, we all know that it's not the case. But they said that reservists will be involved in defending and protecting different strategic objects on the territory of the terrorist federation and stuff like that. So even when they just mobilize those reservists, they will still have this opportunity to feed the front line and increase the number of their personnel burnt in the meat assaults. Do you have any information on that, by the way? And how realistic is the possibility that we will see this mobilization, for example, this year?
I don't. I don't have anything on that. Something that comes to mind is the way that Russia is assaulting right now in these small groups of infiltration. It doesn't take, in some areas they are sending more elite, more professional soldiers for sure. But a lot of them don't appear to have much training, and they're just being sent forward and try to find the nearest building and take shelter. When you're conducting assaults like that, it doesn't take training at the platoon or company level. It doesn't take a lot of soldiers at one time. It takes a lot of soldiers over a long period of time. So I wonder if these tactics actually will play into that, where rather than, if they conducted a head-on battalion assault in Pokrovsk right now, you're probably talking about losing a battalion. But if you spread that battalion over the course of the next month, still lose a battalion, but you lose them slowly. And that's the kind of thing that could, that's effectively saying the war as we see it right now, continuing on at that slow pace. It's still deadly. It's still a threat. But I wonder if that'll play into kind of a decrease in Russian manpower, spreading them out over a longer period.
Yeah, I also thought about that, and that's something that I can see, by the way, that Russians are building their whole doctrine and their whole recruitment approach around the tactics of small groups, basically recruiting personnel in like prisons and those covered mobilizations that they have. They have, for example, paratroopers, which is like VDV, their most combat-worthy force, which is actually their only combat-worthy force, all right, together with some Spetsnaz, but of course you cannot use Spetsnaz as infantry. However, Russians can do that as well. But they have that combat-worthy force, the combat-worthy units, in order to conduct some more serious operations. But when we're talking about the slow grinding, as we can see on the front lines, they don't need the combat worthiness at all. In my personal opinion, they just need to throw men and make sure that at least somebody can dig in somewhere between the positions, find the gap, and then this is how we move. Well, basically, you know it yourself. Did you notice the same? The fact that they are building their whole recruitment approach around this tactic of small groups.
I haven't seen that to the degree that you mentioned. It makes sense, so I don't doubt it. But I haven't seen. I don't have a lot of insight into the Russian recruiting and how they're playing that out. It's interesting, though. When you think about some of these units going forward and just kind of being bled dry, I don't know. One thing I think about with the recruiting is with any military in any war, you end up kind of having to move down the socioeconomic ladder the longer the war goes on. So early in the conflict, there were a few casualties, and there were a lot of people that would say, whatever that amount of pay is worth it. As the casualties mounted, there were fewer people willing to take that pay and take that risk. So you started moving down to people that were not educated, not employable, maybe already injured and unable to carry out certain tasks. That seems like it's going to continue. So, like, there's no way. I find I'd be very surprised if there are wealthy high schoolers in Moscow. They're getting ready to graduate and say, you know what I want to do is join an assault unit in Donetsk. Like, get out of here. There's no way the money's worth it for that kid. But when you go north and east into some of these more rural areas, more and more, it seems like those are the only ones they're going to be willing to go. Or then, prisoners or people that can't get jobs or whatever it might be. So it's usually not a good thing for militaries. As you go further and further down, you come into more and more problems, generally speaking. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. So we have another question. Russell asks, please ask Preston when he's going to announce his candidacy for U.S. Senate. Really?
All right, Russell. It's a running joke on a podcast I do. Our politics are pretty nasty, man. I'm sure you whether you like it or not, you're probably a little bit more tied into it now than I would imagine, than you've been in the past. And it's pretty nasty. I don't know if that's unique to the United States, but does not sound like an enjoyable career, to say the least.
I agree on that. Like, being a politician, I think it's like a curse. You become a politician and immediately people start hating you even more than now on YouTube. Nine Moon Planet mentions Harley. By the way, do you know Harley, the engineer? He's demining Ukraine together with his team. We were talking about the demining in Ukraine, and that is something, by the way, worth mentioning. Harley, you can find his channel on YouTube, my dear friends. Those who don't know Harley from my streams, all right? So you can find his channel on YouTube. He also has Instagram. Please do find him. Please subscribe and please support him as much as possible, because this is very, very important. Harley was a volunteer. He would bring radio stations and different other equipment to Ukrainian soldiers. And then eventually he also joined the EOD squad in Ukraine, and they demined, I don't know, like fields and fields in Ukraine over these years. You can see the pictures on his Instagram. They are absolutely freaking impressive. Do I see a canine over there?
This is Helly. She has decided that I've not been paying enough attention, I guess. So yeah, get ambushed every so often. This sweet girl.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Yeah, we love animals here on this channel.
Usually she's just hanging out back here in the office, but this is about the time of day. It's 2:30 Central Time, where she's like, okay, enough. Now that's enough work. It's kind of her move.
That's so cool. Okay, let's check out some more commentaries. Preston should get to know Harley 100%. He also is pumping out trucks for the army. By the way, you participated in the fundraiser for together with the Car for Ukraine, right?
Yeah, the Christmas one, right?
Oh, can you talk more about that?
All right, yes, happily, because we started another one that's going on right now. Mm-hmm. So Car for Ukraine, of course, does incredible work. And talk about one of the big takeaways from being in Ukraine. I got the chance to hand off, or link up is probably a better way to put it, with some of the drivers that were taking vehicles that the audience had fundraised from Lviv out to Kramatorsk to hand off to a couple of units. So we got to hands-on with the vehicles and see the new armor they'd added and the winter tires and all of that. So this is one of those where incredible organization. I didn't realize how important what they were doing really was. We know that there's a big need for vehicles all across Ukraine. We know that exists. And I've helped our audience has helped a lot of different units acquire trucks and go out and buy them as needed. What I did not know was how difficult that is. So it's not just a matter of getting the vehicle, but often, look, I mean, we're all people, right? So if you need a vehicle and you find one for $2,000 and you're raising money, it's very tempting to go buy that $2,000 vehicle, even if we know deep down that there's probably a reason it's $2,000. A lot of these guys, they need the vehicle today. So they're buying whatever they can as soon as they can. And even when the ones that are donated or contributed, a lot of times they get onto these roads in Donetsk and they break down. They need so many services right away that all of a sudden the soldier is left with, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 worth of repairs before the thing can even be used. That's the opposite of what we're trying to do, right? So Car for Ukraine, what's awesome about these guys is they've delivered now over 800 to Ukraine. They've done this a time or two, and they source the vehicles, but then they fix them up. So they for the ones that I saw, they had added a little bit of kind of light armor protection, which would be enough for FPV drones, especially if it just hits on the side of the vehicle. They provide all services to the vehicle, kind of fix it up so it's ready to go. And I want to say they gave a number, but it's something like it's ready to go 70,000 miles without its next service or something, right? New tires, they replace parts in the engine, all of that. So when the soldier gets the vehicle, it's go time, and they can put it into use right away, which is just huge. We were talking to some of the commanders there, and they were talking about how much of a liability it is at times. Like some of them wouldn't sign for vehicles because they were like, no, I got it. That one was donated and I got it. We need vehicles, but I'm looking at that and it needs so much work. We can't take on that responsibility. So that was kind of an eye opener. In turn, so we wrapped up that one at the end of the year with Car for Ukraine, and they asked if I would be interested in doing another one. And of course, so we're doing one right now to outfit a new drone battalion with trucks. So we're doing that one now. But incredible organization over
We can hear some kind of sirens there. My God, what's going on?
It's crazy here, middle Tennessee. I guess we got something going on outside.
My God. Yeah, Car for Ukraine are doing an absolutely amazing job, my friends. We literally collected a car for my brigade, for RUBIZH, which makes me absolutely happy because that's some big achievement for me personally, because those are my guys, I'm worried about them, and it's so amazing that this amazing community on the other side of the screen helped to make this possible, and they already received that truck. So guys, if you're watching this, please support Car for Ukraine. They are absolutely fantastic. How many vehicles are being blown up each month? Hundreds, thousands? No one knows the answer. And this is something very important, again, because we are talking about trucks. All right, trucks already in 2023, they had a very, very big demand on the front lines, and the approximate, the average lifespan of a truck back in 2023, 2024 was approximately 2 weeks. All right, if it's operating on the front line, it's approximately 2 weeks, because we're talking fragments, we're talking the Donbass roads that literally don't exist and look like they were bombed for 8 years, all right? And all that contributes to the fact that the trucks lose their mobility and become useless very, very fast. Now, with the drone hazard, again, it's also very, very hard. And besides that, getting even a single truck that is mobile, that is functioning, is actually hard. Because I was running that fundraiser on my channel, for example, couple of weeks. Took a couple of weeks to literally fundraise for a single truck and to find a proper one, put an armor on it, and do all sorts of maintenance and stuff. So probably that's the answer. What do you think?
I feel like the number's probably in the thousands. And I feel like I saw a stat on this recently. I talked to some guys recently. They referred to the mine shaft potholes in the Donbass, where it's not just a little bump, but you'll go down. I mean, they talked about like 2 feet deep out of nowhere. And they're driving these. That's the other thing is, look, I've blown out a tire on my truck driving down the interstate because I'm not paying attention. These come out, I mean, these guys are going fast, right? There's drones overhead, so you're not casually going 5 miles an hour trying to dodge these things, and they can rip an axle off. So it's not just the drones; it's all that other stuff as well. We actually, I know a unit that just worked to pick up oh gosh, a tow truck, because a lot of these vehicles, we think of a truck is destroyed or can't work anymore. It's not always that the truck is completely gone and burned out and can't function. Sometimes it just hits that pothole and rips an axle off. If they had a tow truck, they could pull it back and actually make those repairs, or even does get hit by a drone and blows up a certain portion of the truck, but some of it is still fixable. So they actually went out and bought a tow truck for when those times happen. They're going to run out there, hook it up, and bring that thing back. Be interesting to see how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully it will work because, again, trucks, no matter how good they are, but still they are big and relatively slow moving target for drones, and it's very hard to evade those. I have crashed into a hole. I don't recommend it ever. Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of numbers, by the way, before you joined, and by the way, thank you for joining us earlier. Before you joined, we talked about numbers, and we have some very interesting statistics coming from Russians. I want to hear your opinion on this, because the Russian ombudsman in Sverdlovsk Oblast said that 8,000 Russians went missing only in 2025, only in Sverdlovsk Oblast. So considering that Russia has like 85 regions, we used the calculator, and it turns out that roughly, okay, based only on this data coming from a single Russian region, roughly Russia could have lost like almost 700,000 men missing only in 2025. What do you think about this?
The numbers are hard to fathom. Being honest, they a long time ago got to the point where it's hard to understand. If we didn't have as much footage coming out of this war, I would say that it'd be very easy to say these numbers have to be fabricated. But I'm sure plenty of folks as well that are watching as much of this video as they can and documenting this, so it lines up, and it's just hard to fathom. Again, my experience is in the global war on terror here in the United States, and it's a pretty big military. But when somebody would die, like it would kind of reverberate across the force, and you'd remember that one person, because that one person is important, and you'd be talking about them for months and years after the fact. And to go from that, I mean, I was in a battalion that lost 16 soldiers in a 1-year deployment, and that was considered, it is significant, right? 16 lives. That was staggering. So it's genuinely just hard for me to get my head around numbers like 30,000 in a month. What the hell? And then when you get into hundreds of thousands, talking about either killed, severely wounded, or missing, yeah, it's a little, it's hard to comprehend is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah. 2019, 2020, we lost 4 guys in a single deployment as well. My brigade did. And that was overwhelming. Like four guys. And it was before the full scale, so we were at the Svetlodarsk Bulge. It was kind of intense there, but still, we were not prepared to that. We knew that we would lose some men, but 4 guys, unfortunately, some of those were my good friends, and that was absolutely overwhelming. Now, of course, 2026, when you can open any Telegram channel like the one from Madhyar and just see those, mug shots. And that is absolutely insane. Currently, this war is just so transparent, meaning that you can basically confirm every kill using a daily footage.
Yeah, I don't know how that ends up being good or bad for humanity. I think about that a lot. of there was a part of me that thought back in World War II, especially in the U.S., they put sensors on the information, and there was a period of time where they were very limited in showing like dead American bodies because they didn't want to scare, overwhelm, or depress the American people. And I can understand the argument in both directions. Showing that can be very graphic and traumatizing. Not showing that can lead to this idea that war is a game or war is fun. I don't know what the answer is to that. I can understand both arguments, but that the cat's out of the bag at this point. Like you can see every one of these strikes, and to your point, you see the scared look on someone's face before the drone impacts, and you can look at 100 of those today. I don't know. I don't know if that's making war less appealing or if it's gamifying it more, and maybe people think that it's. I don't know.
I think, considering the fact that we are approaching this era of unmanned wars, basically involving a lot of land-based platforms, right, to defend positions, for example, like the one that was controlled by the 3rd Assault Brigade for more than a month, and the position is still under Ukrainian control. I think that more and more people that join the wars of future, they will be operating drones, and basically to them the war will still be a game to some extent. But there's also infantry that will never think so, all right, because infantry are the guys who have to actually step into the kill zone and actually do the job themselves. But I personally think that, if you don't experience the war yourself, it's very, very hard to understand this, even if you try very, very hard, because no movies, no footage, even graphic footage from the war doesn't actually tell you everything about this. And I wanted to ask you a related question. How different is being a content creator and being a military content creator, somebody who has a military background?
Well, I don't know. I've never done it any other way. So it's just me. This is the only experience I have. I enjoy what I do. I like being able to interact with people like you and folks like your audience. I look forward to this. I understand the topics can be dark and can be depressing at times. That's probably the most unique aspect of this is, it's almost different when we're talking about soldiers in war, but there's been, of course, not just in this conflict, but in plenty of others recently where there's been a lot of civilians that have been targeted and children that have died. That's always tough to try to figure out how do you share that information because it's important. And an interesting aspect I think in this space is in content creation, you're competing for attention. That's a part of this game, right? Whether it's the thumbnail or the title or the tone of your voice, how you talk, whatever, the editing. And I struggle with that sometimes around some of the darker subjects. There was a massacre in Sudan a few months ago, and I want people to see the information. I want people to hear about it. But I certainly don't want to do some sort of clickbait something. Don't want to gamify it. Don't want to downplay it. Don't want to have some shocked looking face on the side. So that's something that I feel like maybe wouldn't be an issue if I was focused on gardening. But it's the nature of this, I guess. And I hope that having some military background and some experience there maybe helps with that, to be able to address what are serious subjects in a serious way and not downplay it. But it's tricky, man. I imagine you feel the same with trying to figure out how to share such important topics, but not make light of it, if that makes sense.
First of all, it's very, very hard because you cannot post everything on a YouTube, and I'm sure that your videos were also like canceled a lot because of some footage that you accidentally you decided that it's fine, but YouTube decided that it's not fine. But another thing is my channel, for example, it became known due to tragedy, you know, and no, doesn't matter how much um, how much important this channel to me is. But again, just as you said, if I did gardening, it would be much easier. But I'm talking about war and I'm talking about tragedy, and that's, by the way, one of the reasons why, for example, I never put paid advertisement in my YouTube videos, because that would be absolutely cringy, right? Like, we're talking about the strikes on Ukraine, but this video is sponsored by NordVPN. Yeah, just in case. So that is something. On one hand, of course, this channel is big opportunity to talk to all those beautiful people there in the chat, and deliver to them the information from Ukraine, about things surrounding Ukraine. On the other hand, I know that this channel is actually it emerged due to the tragedy of this war. That is why, like, I don't even have this, silver button,
Oh
that
yeah,
you
yeah,
receive for, like,
yeah.
yeah, 200,000 subscribers. I kind of tried to ask Google if they can send it to me, but it was like back in 2022. And they said, like, yes, we might try, but they didn't, because they didn't know how. So they literally didn't send it. And then I realized that most probably I don't even need it, because, there's nothing to be proud about. Like, I didn't do anything ultra cool, I'm not making like amazing videos attracting a lot of attention. They're not for entertaining. They are actually explaining about the tragedy of the war. And that is why it's very hard to have a military background and be a content creator, I think.
Well, I'm gonna jump in because that's not fair. You said that what you've done, you've not done anything that's important or not, impressive. Like, get out of here. All right. There are so many people that look to you to understand what's happening day in and day out. That is an invaluable resource. So I'm not going to let you play it down like it's not anything. And realistically, like, you're reaching a huge audience, but if you reach an audience of 3, you're having a real impact on 3 people. That's insane. That by itself is crazy. And of course, your audience is significantly larger than that. So enough already. I know what you're getting at. You're being very humble, and that's awesome. But the work you do is very, very important, and you should be proud of what you've done.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate it. Even though I don't think so. But I have a question to you. Whenever you are getting, like, invited to different streams, especially if you're a military, to different streams, different studios, and they ask you, what would you advise to the leadership of your country, in terms of, like, some breakthroughs, in terms of strategic operations? And do you think, like, man, like, I'm not a general, that's not my level to advise those things at all right? But despite that, if you were advising Ukraine's command for 2026, based on your experience, on your observations, what would your top priority be for 2026?
Kind of doubling down on what we saw at the end of 2025 and what we're seeing right now. So any sort of offensive action seems very targeted to take advantage of Russian mistakes. Kupiansk, Zaporizhia, Dobropilya, those were not major operations in terms of personnel and equipment, but they were major in terms of the planning. The guys that went into those areas, they knew every door. Like, that is how Ukraine should be carrying out any sort of offensive operations right now, rather than trying to take back, say, all of Kherson. I think that's great. I think that's a really effective use of what Ukraine has available. The second is just to double down on the drone wall that they put up throughout the east. It has stopped Russia cold. I mean, we're seeing little progress, but my God, the casualties are staggering. So that is a death machine out there in Donetsk. And whether that means more drones, more lethal drones, more drone units, better logistics, whatever it is, I would say just keep that going, because that is a huge thorn in the Russian side. I don't think they need to reinvent anything. It seems like what we've seen in the last 6 to 9 months has been pretty effective.
That's interesting. Another question. Since, I don't know, like 2024, we constantly constantly hear different warnings coming from the intelligence agencies in Europe and in the US as well, before Donald Trump, that we can expect some sort of Russia's either invasion of Europe or probing NATO countries for a possibility of invasion. And we also see, for example, Russian troops expanding their bases along the border with the European countries, with Baltic countries, with Poland. Considering the fact that, let's be real, they burned majority of their functioning tanks, APCs, and their artillery, and also the resource of their artillery is very low at this point. We can still see them stockpiling long-range missiles, all that, and basically preparing, even despite the fact that they're throwing all they have at Ukraine at this point, they still stockpile stuff for war. Do you think it's possible for them to actually invade one of the European countries and take, for example, control, let's say, Suwalki corridor, right? Is it a real scenario, or they will need something more to make it happen? Or they just think that they can do it easily because though Ukrainians are fighting the war of today, basically, but NATO countries are still not prepared to face the challenges that Russia can pose today. What do you think?
I don't think there's a real threat of the Russian military rolling across the border into a NATO country. Russia doesn't want to fight with NATO. They can't do that. Like, that is not a fair fight. NATO coming together would absolutely destroy Russia. Rolling a battalion or a brigade or division of tanks into NATO territory would be catastrophic for Russia. And on top of that, to your point, like, where are they coming from? Right? Like, where is this magical Russian army that is not being used in Ukraine? So I don't think that in the near term is a concern. I mean, even 5+ years out, the bigger concern to me would be some sort of asymmetric type warfare, whether it's the little green men, Crimea and the Donbass in 2014, or maybe something even more subversive than that, kind of trying to foment domestic issues in some of the Eastern Baltics, perhaps. I think that's more likely, maybe testing out some of the NATO limitations. And I think we may have already started to see this with some of the drones flying over certain NATO territory. What is the response going to be? And kind of pushing that envelope little by little to see what they can get away with. So I know that's a challenge, because where does a cyber attack fall on the scope of NATO Article 5? Or what about a reconnaissance drone flying over NATO territory? That's a little murkier than tanks rolling into Poland, which of course would be a pretty clear-cut sign. So I think that is very likely. In fact, I think it's more likely now than it has been in a while, because I think Putin has reason to believe that NATO might not be as airtight as we present it. I think the United States has unfortunately kind of poked some holes in that over the course of the last year, and maybe led to, even if it's just 1% belief that we might not band together in the event of an attack. I think that's enough for Putin to see exactly what that looks like. And that would be more of these kind of asymmetric type attacks. Whether that could lead to anything substantial, we'll see. But I'd be surprised. What was it? September, we saw a pretty significant drone incursion over Poland. I expect we're going to see 1 or 2 of those again this year, maybe in Poland, maybe elsewhere. But I think Russia's going to poke where they can.
I completely agree with you. Things that actually question the Article 5. It's hybrid warfare. Basically, that's what I talked about on the Munich Security Conference this weekend. I said, guys, Russia will not fight conventionally. The Russians will be fighting using the measures that don't necessarily trigger the Article 5, the NATO response. They will fight using different tricks. They will fight using the hybrid warfare, because this is something that you cannot respond to in a military way, in the conventional way. And that's very important to remember. We are approaching the end of today's stream, but before we finish, I still have a couple of questions for you, my friend. So because our today's stream is called Filter Coffee Unfiltered News, I want to ask you this. Is there something that you believe personally that would actually make like half of your viewers immediately angry?
Something that would make half the viewers angry?
Yeah.
Probably if I dove headfirst into domestic politics, because that's a pretty safe bet that people are split 50-50, and no matter what you say, you're going to upset half the audience. So I generally try to stay out of that. I think my approach has generally been that war and conflict is political. You cannot, it's a part of politics. You can't separate that, but it doesn't have to be partisan. And that's how I try to approach it. So I could, if I went full partisan bent in one direction or another, I know for a fact people would be livid right away.
I can confirm that, my friend, 100%, because I cannot stay partisan because I am biased 100%. Like you cannot be unbiased if you are a Ukrainian, all right? You cannot be unbiased towards Russians, and of course you cannot be like objective and pretend that you don't care. For example, when some leader says that your country actually started the war and it's your fault and things like that. I don't know what it takes to actually, keep yourself calm and, be professional. I have huge respect to you for that.
I do have very strong feelings about a lot of these things, and some of them line up. It's a messy spot is probably the best way to put it. But what I have, maybe I'm wrong here, but my belief has been that if you start going down the overtly partisan path, I think you might lose more people than you gain, and it might be a net negative. So, for instance, there's a lot happening in Eastern Ukraine that I'd love to update people about, and I think there's people on both sides of the political spectrum that want to hear about that. But if half of them view me as a hack for the other side, they might not tune in, and I think that's a loss. So it's tricky, man. There's no perfect answer there.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I ask you another question, there is another one coming from Adam Gronak. Could you please ask Preston, as an artilleryman, what he thinks of the North Korean artillery and troops, considering the fact that currently, by the way, North Korea is turned into this weapon production hub for Russia?
Yeah, I think I didn't hear anything really overwhelmingly positive or negative in terms of their artillery. I did hear that their troops were actually relatively well trained. I mean, they didn't send prisoners in; they sent soldiers with actual military training, and the guys that were on the other side of that fight from them seemed to they spoke well of them in terms of the threat they posed. Right? They didn't want them to be there; they didn't like them, but they were not. They were not just running headfirst into the meat grinder. There was actually some skill involved there, from my understanding. On the artillery side, I think this has been a huge win for North Korea, man. And they've still got guys there. And they are able to go in, take these lessons learned, engage in modern combat. And I mean, when was the last time Korea fought a war, right? Korean War, 70 plus years ago. So now they've got soldiers actually engaged in this. And even if it's just with their artillery guys firing rockets a good ways back from the front, they're there and they're taking these lessons back. And I think, I don't know the effectiveness of those artillery units, but this has been a big win for North Korea in a lot of ways, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that this is related to the fact that they were reported to have been firing at Ukrainian positions from the Russian territory recently. Yeah, so it's crazy to see that they are gaining experience like mad. And remember last year, one of them was taken as prisoner, or his body was taken, and his like diary was discovered, and there were even like different schemes on how they avoid Ukrainian drones, luring them to one of the North Korean soldiers while the other one is trying to shoot it down and stuff like that. They are learning, and they are preparing. So yeah, I agree with Matt that South Korea must be getting nervous 100%. I think that it would be great if South Korea cooperated more closely with Ukrainians in terms of experience share, because that will be very, very important for South Koreans as well. And with that, my dear friends, I think that we can call it a day. And Preston, first of all, thank you so much for joining my stream. It's a big privilege to have you here on my channel. It's been a while since we actually planned this stream, and I'm extremely happy that it actually happened. Is there any message that you would like to pass to this amazing community watching us right now?
No, I mean, thank you for the invitation. It's been looking forward to this, and thank you for your patience in my mixing up the time zone. So always a great to get that off with a bang. But to the audience, just the Car for Ukraine thing. I think you and I both speak pretty highly of that organization. I know folks are often looking for ways to support, ways to contribute, and that's one that they're working all day, every day. So if you're ever looking for a good organization, that's it. But Starsky, thank you so much for the invitation here, man. This was really enjoyed this.
Thank you, my friend. And also, my dear friends, you have three options if you feel like supporting Ukrainian defenders. You have three options. First option is Steffen Bar, the good friend of mine from Netherlands who is currently fighting in Ukraine. You can find his link in the description to this video. Also, check out Preston's channel, check out his links and his fundraiser on the Car for Ukraine. It's also very, very important because Preston is currently fundraising for a Ukrainian battalion, which is crazy. And also find Harley, all right? Harley, the engineer, the deminer who is currently demining Ukrainian territory. And please support him because he's doing absolutely amazing job in Ukraine. Check out his Instagram as well. You will be impressed to see those thousands of mines that he collected, and I will greatly appreciate your support to those people, my friends. With that, thank you so much, dear moderators. So good to see you, Ali. Thank you so much, dear members of my channel. Big thanks to everyone who supports Ukraine, because this is the right thing to do. So, Preston, don't run away, please. So, with that, see you soon, and also treat yourself, all right? Have something good after this stream, because that's what we do all the time. Be safe, and bye-bye.